I'm Alexander Casala, contributing journalist at NBC Out, and today I'm here with Peppermint from RuPaul's Drag Race Season 9 and the new Broadway musical Head Over Heels. How are you?
Honey, I am fabulous!
So I got to see the show last night.
Yes, you did.
It is like so much friggin' fun.
Oh my gosh, it's probably the most fun that, I haven't been to a lot of Broadway shows, but it's so fun. It's a comedy. It is a hilarious comedy.
It was just like so much fun, in the music, to hear those songs, to know like the songs you know so well, heard like put into the show, and then to hear new songs that you didn't know from the Go-Go's. And your part is so, what I kind of love about your part is you're getting to play the bad person, this sort of bad person.
Yeah.
But it's this bad person that's advocating for like uniqueness and for, you know,
change.
For change.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like, that experience of, you know, first of all, being on Broadway as the first transgender person to originate a principal role? And yeah.
First of all, being in a Broadway show anyway is, who doesn't dream of that at one point or another? So it's an honor, it's a dream come true. I'm on cloud nine just being in any Broadway show. But being in this show gives me an opportunity to really, it's the perfect gig for me because I'm marrying performance and song and dance and comedy and some really important issues all in one, and a lot of glitter and rhinestones all together.
And it's like so amazing to me because you were Broadway adjacent for years, combining all those things. When you performed in the gay clubs, you were singing live, you were dancing, you were lip syncing, you were hosting shows, you were making jokes in between, and now you're just like 2 blocks over doing it again.
It's true. I feel like my whole path has definitely prepared me and led me to this. I went to school for musical theater performance and took a break from that because I didn't really dig the whole, I guess I didn't really see any parts for me on Broadway. And so there was a lot of work for me to do in the clubs, as working as a queen in New York. And so coming into this show, it was such a surprise, a sweet surprise, knowing that I could bring all the skills that I've learned over the past couple of years onto the Broadway stage every night.
It's kind of like that with auditioning in musical theater. You feel like you're constantly trying to fit this cookie cutter. And for people like you, maybe people like me, there isn't that cookie cutter that exists.
Exactly.
So you go out and you create your own, like you create this character that is you, that you're able to perform 6 times a week in the gay clubs.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I was auditioning very early on, right after college, and I was auditioning for roles that I would have never wanted to do. And because I didn't fit into that box, I felt a lot of pushback. I could feel the judgment even before I would start singing. And so I quickly learned this game isn't for me. And I really wanted to deal in authenticity. And so that's what I did with a little flair, you know, in the gay clubs and beyond, traveling the world and on some really large stages, sharing the stages with Shaka Khan and just really honing my craft and really figuring out who I was as a performer, as a person, and connecting with issues that are important to me, like AIDS and HIV prevention, and then, of course, LGBT advocacy. And so marrying those things was something that I was passionate about for the past 10, 20 years. And now being able to bring that to a Broadway stage, it's full circle.
And I kind of mentioned this before, what's so interesting to me and sort of the parallel that I see with the show is, like I said, your character is sort of the villain at first of this, but what you're advocating for is uniqueness, and you're advocating for non-sameness. And I think there's a parallel between the show and what's happening right now is, you know, conservative people, some may say the Trump administration, is also trying to paint people like us who are advocating for originality and uniqueness and diversity as the ones that are wrong and the villains. Because by the end of the show, you know, your character comes full circle and, you know, your ideas are accepted by everybody.
Yeah. I think one of the notions that is important sometimes when you're being ostracized or discriminated against there's a certain fear. And a lot of times I believe that that fear, it doesn't lie at the bathroom door. It doesn't lie at the pulpit or the getting your marriage license or getting married. It doesn't lie at a bakery's door for a cake. It really, at the end of the day, it lies in, we have these rules in place. And if we don't follow these rules, we are afraid that we are just like you, whatever that means. And so, you know, whether it's the freedom to be who you are with sexuality, freedom and fluidity with gender, and that notion alone is scary to a lot of people. So rather than deal with that, then they have all these rules in place, protections in place, things to just block it out so that they don't have to deal with it. And that's one of the issues and topics in the show. And it's a very strong theme in the show. And then, you know, my character introduces a lot of change and a lot of ideas, but it's not like I'm convincing people to follow my way. I'm letting people, the characters, trying to show people to follow their own way and take the barricades out. And maybe that's what we do in the show.
Well, I also love that the show doesn't necessarily put things in like black and white. Like the show is really about living in the gray. And I love that because with like your character, you know, you're gender non-binary. And so there's a whole conversation about he, she, they. And it's dealt with. And I love that about the show. And other characters, it's not necessarily, oh, you're trans, you're a drag queen, but maybe you're a man who likes dressing up a little bit in women's clothing, and that's okay. So I love that the show is really about the spectrum. And it's not black and white, it's about living in the gray.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, that's the perfect way to say it, that it shows that we don't have to exist in the binary. Some people do, and that's perfectly fine. But what I love so much about all those things you mentioned is that these things are celebrated. And there may have been other shows, other television shows, other works of art that have touched on some of these subjects, but so rarely, I've never heard of a Broadway show tackling these issues, making them central, and then celebrating the characters that deal with that. And that's something that I see reflected back when I leave the stage door every night. There's people who are like, I'm non-binary, I saw myself on stage, and I remember never feeling that. Watching commercials, television, a lot of queer people have grown up, people who are now adults, have grown up never having seen anything like themselves. And so being able to give that back to the community is a gift.
So speaking about that conversation about he, she, they, review was written in the New York Times, and it included a joke sort of about that subject. And many people on social media found it to be offensive. They found it to be offensive because of the tone of the joke, and many people felt like it was possibly making a statement about you as an actress. And then the New York Times edited the article, took it out, and the reviewer wrote a statement, and this is what he said. He said, I feel horrible about having offended transgender and non-binary communities. I was trying to reflect the light tone of the show, as well as a plot point in which one character learns to acknowledge another, not as she, but as they. This was meant to be a reference to the character of the Oracle, not Peppermint, the person who plays the role. This unfortunately read as more flippant than I would have ever intended, especially with regard to a performance that marks a historical first. I am deeply sorry. So what are you haven't really talked about this on social media, you haven't responded. What were your feelings when you first read the comment he made?
Well, obviously having seen the show, I know, I can understand, I got the joke. I understood the reference because part of that joke was a direct reference to a context that can only be understood if you've seen the show. That being said, I knew that misgendering this character, this joke would be taken as a misgendering. And the whole point of the show and the story behind the show and my approach to it is that trans existences, non-binary, or people who are gender non-conforming, our existence is not a joke. It's not something that can be used to gain a laugh and then discarded and dismissed. And rather than addressing and rather than addressing the reverence and the importance of what's going on stage in our community and then in our society, rather than addressing that, he made it into something so minuscule that could be thrown out the window. And I think he learned from it. I think he learned very quickly, in less than 24 hours, that there are readers who don't necessarily have the same views that he has and don't necessarily take gender and gender variance as a joke. These are people's identities, and it's a sensitive topic, and I appreciate the apology. It opened up room for a much larger conversation that I think we need to have. And we're having it on stage every night in Head Over Heels. And it's something that I'm hoping carries out outside of the theater. And
it's also just interesting to think, like, not only did he write this, it went through like an editor or 2 editors. It's like the New York Times. So when I saw it, I just was like, I had an icky, gross just feeling about it. I hadn't seen the show when I read it, so I had no idea what he was saying, and I was very confused by it. But just to think that, how do these things get through like so many? That's what's like mind-boggling to me.
It's tradition. It's old school, and so I'm happy to be on Broadway, but I think our show is the dark horse, one of the dark horses this season.
Yeah.
It's fun and it's great and it's a comedy and all those things that you look for in entertainment. But we deal with some issues and topics that may make people uncomfortable, things that they've never thought of before necessarily. And so we're kind of a dark horse because it's great to have a Broadway show that's just funny and entertaining and great, great music, and the Go-Go's music is all that. They're hits, but I think it's not lost on me that the Go-Go's themselves were at times going against the norm. They were an all-female band in a time when that wasn't the style.
They're still not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
They're still not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and so they've had a lot of uphill battles, maybe that they're still fighting. And even though we can look back on their music and reflect on how great it is and was all these years, it's just so great to know that I think it's a perfect pairing because the show is also, there's an uphill battle. We're a little bit of an underdog. And my goal is to champion equality and diversity and introduce these ideals to people who have never thought about them before. And then at the same time, allowing queer folk to see themselves on stage. And so if we can do that, I'm up for the fight.
One of the things that I think is just so amazing about you is, we always hear this conversation about like resisting by existing. And I think that there's nobody better than you to facilitate that feeling, and that you're so empowering because you are just who you are. I mean, look at your experience on Drag Race. And there has been so much conversation, especially the past few months, about the intersectionality of trans identity and drag. Today, what are your thoughts or what are your feelings about that conversation? And, what do you say to people who say, trans women or cisgender women don't have a place in the drag community?
I would say just look at who you're talking to. I have staked my claim in the drag world. I have been working hard in the drag world for 20 years, and I've always been trans. And there's always been cis women contributing to the art form of drag, and trans women and all types of folk contributing to the art form of drag. Drag is for everyone to enjoy and to employ. And so I would challenge those people to look at their views on women, on trans folk, on queer folk, on marriage equality. I would challenge those people to take a different look. And, drag evolves and change. It's an art form. And that's exactly what it should be. Art is open for everyone to enjoy. And there are people who say it's just for gay men to either watch or it's just for gay men to do. And we're done with anything being just for men to do anything. We're done with that. So I've heard for years that trans women can't do drag, women can't do drag. And I have to say that it's not the last time that we'll unfortunately ever hear a man tell a woman that she can't do something.
Yes. Yes!
It's not the last time.
Yes.
And we've heard it before, but we're busting that idea,
There have been people that said, you know, your transness evolved on the show, on Drag Race, and that you fully transitioned after. And do you ever think that a trans woman will walk into the workroom of RuPaul's Drag Race?
I do think so. I hope so. I hope that doors are open for trans women to walk in everywhere, including Drag Race and on television. And I have a good feeling that they will come around and see the value in opening that door. And I've been in transition.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.